All right, and good morning. It's Jennifer Britton. I want to welcome you to our call. Just going to start letting people in. And hi, Kathy, welcome. It's Jennifer Britton. You're here with me. Just to let you know, I'm going to start recording, or recording has started of this. So if you would not like to be seen, let me know, but I want to welcome you, Kathy. And it's just about 11:15. I am going to be looking forward to those that physically drop in with us today. It is increasingly, and there's Kathy. You don't have to video if you don't want to. I've got actually a presentation I want to share today as we move into our call around taking it virtual. And today's been a very, typical day. It's Friday. I don't know about any of you, but it is one of those days of the week where a lot of groups love to meet. I've purposely set this call today at an unusual time, 11:15 a.m. to 11:45. Fits nicely between two groups that I have, one that just wrapped up about 12 minutes ago and one starting at the top of the hour. And as most of you know, I've been doing these quarterly calls now since 2010 as a way to keep connected with the alumni community, as well as with different people who are interested in group and teams, and increasingly with virtual work. So I'm Jennifer Britton. If we haven't met before, nice to meet you, probably more so virtual or through this recording. I recognize your name, Kathy, and if you'd like to share anything about yourself and where you're at, want to just leave a pause point for 30 seconds, but I don't want to put you on the spot. You can also reach out to me by chat. If you are familiar with Zoom, there's a great chat function. But Kathy, did you want to say anything as we get going this morning?
I was just going to say good morning. It's 8:15. I'm in British Columbia, and it's been a while since we chatted, Jennifer. It's a couple of years since I took the group coaching course, but I have been following some of the things you've been doing, and I'm looking forward to today.
Good. Well, thanks for making time to join me. I know as we move into the end of April, it's such a busy time. With these calls, I think where we've gone in the virtual world is so many people just catch up on recordings after. So it's such a pleasure to have you here, Kathy, with us. And again, it's only going to be a half an hour call, which also reflects some of the changes that are happening in our space. When I first launched Group Coaching Essentials back in 2006, it was such a luxury for people to come together by phone in those days for 75 minutes. I think still today with group coaching, we are creating these sacred spots of longer conversations, but when we start to move into more of a virtual like learning environment, people's mindsets and time sets have shifted quite a bit. And so just like others, my work continues to morph and change. As you might notice here today, and I'm recalling, Kathy, it's been quite a few years or several few years since we've worked together. I think I was just working on, or maybe had just published From One to Many, my second book at that stage. My third book is going to be coming out in a couple of months, and it's actually all about virtual conversations. It's called Effective Virtual Conversations. You'll see the new hashtag, Let's Talk Virtual. And as many of you probably know or would have seen happening in my world, in the world that I've been engaging with, so much of my conversations these days are virtual, not just within the coaching world, but with individual clients, team clients, and also group clients. And that shift has not just happened for me in the last 5 years. As I've been reflecting back, since opening the doors of Potentials realized in 2004, and especially in 2005 when my son was born, there have been months where 100% of my work has been virtual. And it's been pretty amazing in the last 13 years, especially, to see how quickly things have been changing. I actually want to share a little bit today about the current context of virtualization, take us into the realm of what is the virtual ecosystem, as I'm calling it, and then talk a little bit practically about what are some of the similarities and differences. If you are, like myself and like many others, engaging with clients virtually, what are some simple things that you'll want to keep in mind as you take it virtual? For me, it's exciting because we really are in an era of ongoing change. As many of you know, I love change. I love change maybe more on a professional learning level than sometimes on a personal level, but we are really in a moment in time, change happening all over the world. So we have everything from, the post-Brexit era. We have the Uber effect of organizations, individuals wanting things now or just now or real time. And one of the terms that's being bandied around in so many organizations, including many that I'm working with, is we're living in a VUCA era. VUCA, V-U-C-A, standing for things are very volatile, very uncertain, things are very complex and ambiguous. Now, if you look around and you think about political events, if you think about geographic events, if you think about what's going on in your backyard or half a world away, I think we can all think of many, many examples of how the world is truly becoming VUCA. When I am with organizations, I'm finding a lot of the teams that I'm working with are struggling with this. They may be a global team scattered across the world. They may be an intact team that's working in downtown Toronto, or they may be a team that's scattered across, Canada or the US. And within that current context, it really is, I think once again for us as coaches, reinforcing the need and the value of creating pause points in bringing people together. So I think that's a real positive. It is creating complexity, though, for leaders themselves. And increasingly, I'm finding a lot of professionals that I work with are now being tasked with having to lead their own virtual and remote teams. Again, whether remote means global or whether it means across a big urban center, a lot of organizations are having to look at how do we virtualize, and how do we virtualize in a way that is engaging. And that truly is what my new book's all about, effective virtual conversations. How do we have better digital and virtual conversations, whether we're a coach or we're a leader? What are the things we want to be doing? What are the conversations we want to be sparking? And so definitely more coming out in the next few months as we Let's Talk Virtual, and as the book is going to press, and that will be happening before summer 2017. So lay of the land, a couple of other things that you might have been hearing about, seeing, is of course the whole methodology of Agile. It seems to me everywhere I turn, and whether it's because I work with clients in education, healthcare, financial services, everyone's talking Agile, which is a whole wonderful set of principles in and of themselves. I'd like you to think for a moment, and again, if you're listening, I'd like you to just note for yourself, what do you see as some of the current context shifts that are happening that are leading perhaps to a more virtual programming necessity in your world? Across this ecosystem, we have so many different ways that we can be engaging with people, whether it's just in time, like through e-learning strategies, or whether it's real time through peer learning approaches. One of the things that I think is so exciting is many organizations are now integrating peer coaching, group coaching circles, bringing coaches in to work with their teams, their leaders, and building their own internal teams of coaches, of professional coaches. So I love the work that I do because I really do get to move across what I'm terming, this is from the new book, terming the ecosystem of virtual learning. And, there can be quite a myriad for you looking at it. I'd like you to just maybe note for yourself, what are the different things? Are you hosting meetings? Are you working perhaps in the area of planning and goal setting? Are you working on education or team development? One of the things I've been dabbling with in the last 3 years, since 2014, has been moving many of my programs into an on-demand environment. So doing a lot of video-based learning. And it's been very interesting to see how both public individuals have been, accessing me, accessing my programming through that arena, whether it's around group coaching. Well, it's not purely around group coaching. Usually it's just around working on group and team programs, not coaching per se. Or in the video-based learning environment, I've been doing a lot more e-learning with organizations, with bigger organizations that want to do crisp sort of 1 hour to 8 hour programs that are either blended. When I say blended, some are just in time and some are real time. So just in time being, here's some content you can look at. Now real time, let's come together. So just note for yourself, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here today on the ecosystem, but why I've chosen that whole metaphor is multifold. In fact, back in 2012, I was starting to talk about the ecosystem of learning. Many of you would know that I've, for several years now, talked about this continua of coaching, training, facilitation. And I think as we move into the virtual learning space, sometimes our conversation zones can become even more fluid. Now, I was originally trained, I did my grad work in environmental studies, and what I really see as common to our natural ecosystem is just All of these arenas are very much interconnected. There's a lot of learning that can happen between these different disciplines, or sometimes they are considered different disciplines, the training versus the coaching, mentoring versus learning. I would assert, though, as we really move into these times of continued change, all of us, leaders, coaches, professionals of all stripes, are going to need to really become more attuned to what can be learned through osmosis. If you imagine these different fields coming together, where we can be sharing best practices and where we can be harnessing the best of everything. So I want to spend just a few minutes on what's different. You know, if you're just starting out on your journey to do things a little differently in the virtual domain, whether it is phone, we still have a lot of work still happening by phone, whether it's by Skype, and many of you would know that many organizations have moved to a Skype for Business. So your clients may be using Skype for Business. They may or may not be able to bring you in on Skype for Business as an external person. Just be aware. I was on a call earlier this week. We were not using Skype as a platform, but we needed to have a separate conversation. I said, let's see if we can jump on Skype. And my firewall, well, I cannot get behind their firewall on that. So we had to do a different workaround. But there are so many great platforms now that help us really have these different real-time conversations in the virtual or digital domain. And I'm putting that term out. In fact, the subtitle of the new book, it's Effective Virtual Conversations, Engaging Digital Dialogue for Learning, Relationships, and Results. And a lot of my clients are really using these two terms interchangeably, digital and virtual. So you'll even hear me using the two today. I personally prefer virtual. I think always whenever I'm working with people, it doesn't mean, virtual does not mean not true. You know, I do hear some people saying, well, it's virtual, that's not real. Well, you know what, if we're in a room together and we can see each other real time, that's as real a conversation as we could be, just as if we were sitting around the table. I think what you'll notice, though, is different are a couple of things, and you may want to take note of these, especially as you go to design or hold or host conversations of your own. One of the main differences, and we've been seeing this for the last decade, there's been a lot of writing and research on this, is around pace. And as many of you would know, I've always asserted in-person environments, we want to change the pace every 7 to 10 minutes, really keep things moving. In the virtual domain, we want to do that even more quickly. And so you'll notice, for example, today's call is only 30 minutes. It's a quick, fast pace. If anyone's interested in going deeper on these topics, certainly reach out to me, info@potentialsrealized.com, or there will be, of course, other videos coming your way. Interactivity is also critical. We can just talk to each other, and that's why I'm keeping this, one-way passage of information a little shorter. With most virtual programs that I run right now, and this has been part and parcel, we have some sort of breakout ability. If you haven't joined me for a while, I've moved all my programming over to Zoom, which is a wonderful interactive virtual platform. And why I like using Zoom so much is we can have some breakouts. So I'd like you just for a moment to think about the current work that you're doing or have planned for the virtual domain. Around these first two notions of pace and interactivity, what are the things you want to keep in mind around design? Just take a moment while I grab a sip of Diet Coke, and I'd like you to just take some notes for yourself. What do you notice or would like to note for yourself around interactivity, what that could look like, and or pace in your upcoming work? A third area that is critical, and it's not tremendously different, but is the importance of connection and trust. And why I've put connection and trust on this list here, because you might be saying, but wait, why is it so important? I think what makes the difference between good virtual events and exceptional virtual events is this notion of trust and connection. And keep in mind, when we are using non-streaming technologies like the phone, it may be disconcerting for people to not know who else is on the line. So for many years, many of you have heard me talk about the importance of creating a virtual table. literally getting people to draw their own table, whether it's a circle or a rectangle, on at the start of phone-based conversations, and then having people introduce themselves sitting around the table as they go. The nice thing with a technology like Zoom, and you would have seen us at the start of our call, if it's just Kathy and I here at the table, and thanks, Kathy, for letting me use you as my compatriot today. Kathy and I were there on the main screen side by side. When I start off virtual calls, I try to take us immediately into the room of having everyone on the screen. Again, with a platform like Zoom, you can have 20 people on the screen, and it would be simply me stopping my share, and we would go out to the main room. So I'm just going to do that again. Again, you can see that I'm here with Kathy, or I put my slides back on, and we move back into the slide view. The challenge with that, though, is, when we have slides in between us, they're literally getting in the way. And if you are coaching or having a facilitated discussion, trust and connection are really important to help people engage. So think about what are the things you could be doing to boost connection and trust. I've been writing a lot about this on both of my blogs. I think most of you are very familiar with the Group Coaching Ins and Outs blog. That's groupcoaching.blogspot.com. What you might not be as familiar with is my other blog, and that's called the Teams 365 blog. That's a leadership blog, a daily leadership blog that I've hosted since 2014. And if you click on over to the Teams 365 blog, which is at potentialsrealized.com, you'll find a number of posts specific to building trust and connection virtually. I'd recommend take a look at them because there are some really quick things that you can be doing in terms of connecting people and building that trust factor, which is essential for more deeper level conversations or more appropriate conversations that we have across distances. And that takes us into this notion of, well, one of the things that can be very different in virtual learning is the even greater or even more pronounced diverse perspectives that show up on the line. If you're working with a global team, for example, how are we helping people get to know the common ground and the differences that exist within the group due to our different geographic locations, due to our different cultural perspectives, etc. So we will probably do a whole additional call on that notion of working across differences, the global leadership culture. This is a focus of my book, and again, takes me back to my roots as a global leader. As many of you might know, I was a leader who led virtually and globally for about 15 years before I stepped into the coaching profession. And since the late 80s, it's been really interesting for me to see just how, this notion of culture and this notion of globalization, whether it's been seen as good or bad, continues to morph and change. At the end of the day, post-Brexit, as we look at sort of what's happening with borders around the world, we still have a myriad of global teams that need to work together and rely on each other every day. So this whole notion of working across differences is very pronounced. It's very pronounced anywhere, I would say, even in a city like Toronto. We have many, many remote teams. They're remote to each other because it could take 2 hours, 3 hours sometimes to cross the city in rush hour. And so even against the backdrop of one city, which is one microcosm, we also want to check our assumptions in terms of what does working across differences mean. I think we can all learn from that, whether our domain or ecosystem is a city or whether it is the world. A final difference that you no doubt will notice in your work is the notion of visual cues. And one of the reasons why I've moved so many of my virtual programs over to platforms like Zoom, which I personally feel is much better than a WebEx, it's a lot less clunky in terms of moving people in and out, is the idea that we can have a lot of visual cues. If we had a larger group today, I could be doing breakout work with you, pairing you with people to meet with, connect with, and you could see each other if you choose to stream as well. And that also helps to build the trust and connection factor. Now, there are, of course, tricky issues that can emerge virtually. Just want to run through a couple of those before we wrap up our call with the top 5 tips that I wanted to share. Lack of connection. In the in-person environment, easy to see when people disconnect. What does happen virtually is you're multitasking. Again, I can't see Kathy today. She may be multitasking. Those of you listening may also be multitasking. So how do you really build that connection with people so that there is a trust factor, and so that when they go to have the death by conference call and turn away, that, you know what, they're still listening with one ear. Another big issue that can emerge, and this can be a whole or require a whole new set of hands or eyes, is lack of familiarity with the platform. If you are moving people into the virtual domain, make sure you spend time at the front end reviewing instructions, letting people to know how to chat, letting people know if there is an annotation tool. And that means you need to be familiar as well with the platform and with technology. Now, for many of us, or many of you listening, you may be a coach, and this has implications, because if you are a coach moving to the virtual domain to make things easier, you might also need a second pair of hands to help you with the technology themselves. So it is quite common in the training domain to have a producer or someone, a second set of hands, to deal with the technology issues. If we're doing that as coaches, we need to bring them into the whole group agreements, confidentiality, what their role is. So as much as we may know things inside out, we do need to focus. And as coaches, we need to be deeply listening. So I do see a tricky issue prospectively for leaders as well as coaches and other professionals is, how do you manage the technology and how do you manage the conversation? And in the realm of virtual, those two things can sometimes have a bit of an impact on each other. So looking at, Kathy's asked me a question here through chat, and thanks, Kathy, for using this because it helps to make this a little bit more robust. How much time, she's asking, how much time do you spend on teaching the platform? And I think this is a great question. You know, what I've started doing with public programs where I'm running it myself, for years I've talked about the importance of doing a pre-call. And with many pre-calls now, I'm starting, when people register for a program, I'm saying, we'll be meeting on Zoom. Number one, are you familiar with the platform? If people are familiar with the platform, great. It probably means that we need just a little bit of time. But there may be a lot of people in your group that are not familiar with the platform. So first of all, I invite them to meet with me for our pre-call on the platform. That way they can see it. Especially, and this is another nuance, you know, some people see themselves for the first time on screen and they're like, oh, like it's confronting. We don't all feel comfortable seeing ourselves streaming all the time. So it is good, I find, to do that one-on-one before we get in the room. But for some groups, the first time we're on a platform is when we are on the phone, or excuse me, on the platform. I do send out the link well in advance, ask people to please check it before the day we start. That way we can do some troubleshooting. And usually in the first call after we do welcome and introduction and set the context, I'll take people through a quick platform run. So on a platform like Zoom, we do things like, here's where you can find the chat. If you need to mute yourself, you'll find a little button on the bottom right, or it could be the upper right. I try to know the platform enough to know some of the nuances between one, the main, what you would see on a main screen for PC versus Apple. And then you also have the wonderful domain that many people may be using, a mobile app. So in the app versions, if someone is dialing in by their iPhone or Android device, there may be a lighter version. Here on Zoom, what the lighter version means is that they may not be able to annotate. So if I ask group members to go, and Kathy, if you want to play with me on this one, I'll invite you right now, Kathy, to go find your annotate button, which is generally on the bottom. It looks like a pen, or it may show up under options or more options. If you can, Kathy, just grab your pen, grab your annotate key, and put a little check mark beside one of the typical types of tricky issues you're not confused by, but might be concerned about. Okay, so I'll give Kathy a minute to do that. But like if there's an area that you might be concerned with, grab your annotate pen, or if that's not working, Kathy, you can also chat with me.
Yeah, I was just going to say, sorry, Jennifer, I do not have anything on the bottom of the screen, which is
okay.
Oh, maybe view options at the top here. I'm checking them all.
That's good.
Oh, there it is. There it is. Yeah. Okay.
There it is. So again, Kathy, thanks for like demonstrating with me just what we need to do. So yeah, see what those options are. Always give people the choice, so there may only be a chat option, and depending on devices, there may only be a chat. So Kathy, I'm going to invite you to just check out the annotate options. As you can see, Kathy chose an arrow. That's one of many. She may also be able to see a pen. There's often a text one as well, which allows people to then type directly on the screen. Now, what you need to remember, and this is where practice makes perfect, in a technology like this, we can hear Kathy typing. So she's found the text one. I'll get you to hit enter. Great info. Thank you. And now I'm going to invite Kathy to erase those, because sometimes you cannot erase your own stuff. As the facilitator, you should have like ultimate authority, but sometimes that doesn't happen. So keep in mind, in a virtual call, even more of a webcast like this, you can get people to interact. And that's where the 7 to 10 minute window, I think, really should become every 3 to 5 minutes. Really get people doing some stuff, interacting, or else they're going to just disengage and sign off. So ultimately, know your platform. We've only got a few more minutes, so I'm going to quickly take us through these next few slides. And I think already you've seen just how fun it can be. We always want to consider the platform. And what you can see here, today we've been using Zoom. WebEx may be the option if you're in an organization or a GoToMeeting or an Adobe, an Adobe version, a GoToTraining, lots of different options, but do some research. Think about what is needed. And I go into much greater depth around, some of the considerations. We want to think about interactivity. We want to think about pace. We want to think about how important it is for people to be able to see each other, etc. There are a myriad of options, but we want to keep it easy for the people that we're working with. So tip number 1 is consider the platform and consider your people. Number 2, spend time focusing on building trust and connection. Today's not a good example. I haven't spent a lot of time connecting the group. And this is where, for those of you that are coaches, you've already got sort of a great set of tools already in your toolkit. How are we creating ways of working? How are we clarifying or co-creating our expectations? In the virtual realm, it's important not to assume, but to get things to be very concise, get things to be very explicit. You'll also want to think about virtualizing in terms of what might need adjustment. Pace. So again, I said rather than 7 to 10 minutes engagement, make it 2 or 3. And you can think about the different engagement points where I've had you stop and pause and note things. I've had Kathy pick up her pen and do things. And that helps to keep people focused. There may be some content that you need to adjust as well as you move to the virtual domain. For several years, I've talked about the importance of pre-work and post-work, especially in a virtual realm. Are there videos we want people to watch before they get on the call? Is there an article we want people to review? Or is there even a self-assessment we want people to undertake? What's really important is let people know what they can expect. So I'm going to jump to bullet 4, which says, what can interaction look like? A lot of people today, and this is the death by conference call that I made reference to, people hear virtual program, they think conference call. They think, oh, I can snooze. I'm going to just like go on mute and do my own thing. If you really do want to create an interactive, vibrant learning conversation, we need to let people know that at the start of the call. You want to let them know that we're going to be doing breakouts. I'm going to be inviting you to share. I will be expecting that we hear from everyone around the room. So set people up for success. And that's done in terms of shared agreements and what interaction can look like, as well as the pre and post work. And remember, people will learn in different ways. So don't always just use chat. You can use emojis. You can do some really fun stuff in the virtual domain as well. Tip number 4 is setting people up for success. I've sort of just shared a little bit about that in my example of like, let people know what they can expect. Do some work around the platform. So meet people one-on-one on the platform before you go into the group environment. And, really get to know your people and what they value and what they find useful. If you have 10 people in the room, you are probably going to have 10 different needs as well as 10 different styles. And that's part of the fun of this work. Finally, as you go to virtual, think about your tools. What are the things that can stay the same? What are the things that might need a change? And what is the environment that you want to create? As virtual facilitators, we really are even more so in the driver's seat because we don't have that same level of engagement with people. So really think about what you want to create. As much as, you know, we think it needs to change, many things can be done in the virtual domain. Many of us use a lot of experiential tools or, you know, body-centered coaching. We might think, oh, everyone just has to sit down during the call. Well, if you're taking your group or team coaching virtual, think about how by call 3 or 4, once people are familiar and comfortable with the platform, how could you actually be starting to incorporate more activity? And that might mean that people are calling in by a mobile app rather than their laptop or their desktop. But I really continue to like to see how, with my group, we can mix things up so that we're not just sitting in our chairs the whole time we're together. Also think, of course, about what is reasonable and what is feasible within your work. What's the time? What's the pre-work? What's the follow-up? It doesn't have to take a lot of time. And you'll notice how even today, this call has been shortened to half an hour. So in our short time today, I've covered 5 quick things that you'll want to consider as you go to virtualize your program. We talked a little bit about the ecosystem, if you remember that big triangle. Remember that there's a lot of fluidity as we move between areas and a lot of things that we can be learning in terms of best practices from related disciplines. And the other thing is, I think, to have fun. You know, chances are things are not going to work as you think they will. So not to get hung up about it, right? It's like we need to set ourselves as well as our learners or team members in a mindset of it may work, it may not work, but that's okay. Let's just have the conversation. If I think about some of the top 5 things I like to use, and I'll certainly expand on these in future calls, you know, I do a quick activity where I get people to share what's outside their window. And that is a quick way to bring people together. In the middle of winter, if I'm here in, you know, the north end of Toronto, I might look out and say, you know what, I'm watching a snowstorm happen. And someone calling in from Barbados is saying, well, actually, I'm looking out at the ocean. And someone in Hong Kong might say, well, you know what, it's evening now, and I'm looking out my 20th floor apartment, and I'm seeing, you know, the lights of Shanghai around me. So it's really fun to help people also connect by sharing a little bit about what's outside their window, because we have this new window created, i.e. the virtual realm, now with the platforms we use. 3 more quick tips or 3 more quick areas. I continue to love bringing visual cards into my work. Again, you can go to the blogs to see more about that. I like to use breakouts, and we'll use breakouts in future calls so that you can see how that happens. I do like to use annotation, and thank you to Kathy for playing with me on that one. And I think just as in the in-person world, you know, metaphors paint a picture. Even that notion of what's outside my window and thinking about what's on your screen, that's just a metaphor of like, how much are we seeing? How much are we not? So lots coming this summer, I have to say. The new book is going to be out, so we will have a whole new website forthcoming, but already you could sign up for sort of like the next iteration, you know, what's happening real time. I'll be starting in the next month in May at the Let's Talk virtual newsletter. You can sign up for that if you'd like at http:/bit.ly.com/virtualtalk. I will be continuing my work in group and team coaching. Many of you are interested. When are May programs starting? So quick shout out around that. We have a mentor coaching group for coaches starting May 1st on Mondays at 10:30. That'll run to early August. We also will have group coaching essentials starting on Fridays. I've just set the date. It isn't even here, but Fridays, and that will start on Friday, May 19th at 11 a.m., running for 75 minutes. And the advanced group and team coaching practicum, also virtual. That's a 6-week program designed to give coaches skills and practice in group and team coaching virtually. And that program, Advanced Group and Team Coaching Practicum, will start also on Friday, May 19th at 12:30 p.m., running to 1:30 p.m. Eastern. So lots coming. I hope that you've enjoyed our call today. Kathy, I've got you live, and so not to be the voice of everyone, but what's one quick tip that you've picked up today that you might be able to apply in your work?
Oh, many, many, many. Shortening the content, I think, being able to the pace piece, and just trying lots of tips to help me adapt to my current face-to-face workshop and how that might be, changed in the virtual world. I did have one question, Anne, if you got a moment here.
I
Just
do.
as
Let's go a little bit longer because it's just you and I. And is it something that we can keep recording on so others can benefit from?
Sure. I know you've done so much work in the virtual field. So do you have a sort of a best practice or a formula in terms of time to a ratio, sort of time to the number of people in a group?
Oh, that's great. So are you thinking how much time would it take if I pose a question? How much time would I leave for the group to discuss?
Well, yes, but even the overall, structure. So if you say if you've got 10 people in a group, how long of a session would you think would be ideal to give everybody time to participate?
Great. Good question. So I'm gonna start this off by saying smaller is better. Even more so. For years I've said with group and team coaching, smaller is better. Even more so in virtual calls, because if you really want to create engagement, once you hit about 8 in a group, people will naturally start to disengage. So let's talk about different group size. We can have a very interactive group of 4 to 6. We could be doing most of our work like we are. If we had a few more bodies, we could be opening it up. Let's have some dialogue. Let's go around the room. Once I hit 5 or 6, those engagement touch points are now going to move to breakout. So just like Kathy might be posing a question to her groups, instead of going around the room, we're probably going to go to breakout, have those smaller groups of 3, or even if you have a group of 10, you could have 2 breakout groups of 5 each and have people talk deeper there and then come back to the main room and have some sharing around what they learn. Always once groups hit about that midpoint of 5 people, like you're getting into a whole domain where people start to shut down. So Kathy, I would say there's no right optimum amount of time, but if you're imagining bringing 10 people into the virtual room, all once at a time and going around, like an hour is enough. And even 45 minutes may be just enough because you want to keep the pace fast. And just like in the in-person realm, you want to make sure that you're giving clear instructions so that, everyone knows that they've got 60 seconds. As coaches, we practice this skill of intruding. With virtual groups, I will introduce that skill because it's likely I may need to intrude, give the signal to bottom line. And this is where, Zoom is nice because people can see me as well. But we need to keep calls moving, especially if we have 10, 12, 15 people on the line. With virtual training, if we're now going beyond 15, have 25 people in the room, I am going to have to use breakouts heavily. Otherwise, it becomes a one-way passage of information. It becomes the death by conference call mindset, and no one's benefiting. So it's not to say that you can't do it, but the question mark becomes, what value is there? And another question as a designer becomes, how do I create enough pace changes through individual reflection, perhaps using annotation, then moving people into breakout to keep the focus going? So the focus and the pacing becomes such an important tool for all of us working virtually. And again, I would put leaders in this category because it's no longer just facilitators that are working virtually. Many leaders now need to lead their team meetings. And a team meeting with a team of 15 for 1 hour can feel like pulling teeth for the team leader and the team members as well. And so I go more into agendas and how to really facilitate team meetings more effectively to get people out of this mindset. So Kathy, not a direct answer. Can we, what are you gleaning in terms of is it a group of 10 you're going to be working with?
It could be, yes. And that was some great suggestions. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, you're welcome. And again, I'm planning on continuing calls. It'll be interesting as we move forward. There will be some calls that are going to be earmarked for virtual conversations, some calls that are going to be earmarked for group and team coaching issues. There's definitely an intersect across these domains in my work and so many of our work. So I want to say thank you to Kathy and thanks to you for joining us virtually today. If you have questions or comments, would love to hear from you. I haven't put my email address down here, but it's info@potentialsrealized.com, or you can always reach out to us on Facebook. I have to say I'm not the biggest Facebook, like I'm not on there every day, but at least once a week I try to post something at our Effective Group Coaching Facebook page, and do connect on the Let's Talk Virtual newsletter as well. So Kathy, be well, keep in touch. I hope you'll be back with us for our summer call, which will happen sometime in July.
Great. Thanks, Jen.
Have a great weekend, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.